They said I died in the fire. I heard them. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down whispering to Barbara Morrison across the street. Poor Maggie Sullivan, she said, her voice catching on every word. Burned alive in her own home. Can you imagine? I was standing 30 feet away, wrapped in Thomas's old raincoat I'd grabbed from the garage. The soot on my face made me invisible in the pre-dawn gloom. No one noticed the old woman shivering by the oak tree we'd planted when David was 5. That's the thing about getting older. People stop seeing you long before you're actually gone. But I wasn't gone. And I had proof clutched in my coat pocket, cold hard and real. A small Wise security camera, its little SD card holding everything. Every word. Every can of gasoline. Every match. The fire investigator stepped out of his unmarked sedan, his face grim in the flashing lights. I knew what he was thinking. No survivors. He wouldn't even be looking for me. But he would be looking for a cause. And I had it. I remembered my son's voice from the night before, how he'd paused at the front door after our last dinner together. Sleep tight, Mom. He'd said, that smile never reaching his eyes. Then I heard it, the soft final click of the deadbolt locking from the outside. He thought he was locking me in. He didn't know I'd been sleeping in the garage for 2 months. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited in the cold November darkness, watching the home I'd lived in for 43 years burn down to its bones. The house where Thomas proposed to me on the back porch, where David took his first steps in the kitchen, where I'd buried my husband's ashes under the oak tree 3 years ago, even though he'd wanted to be scattered at Lake Morrison. Some promises you keep, some you break. I had the recording. I had my life. And I was about to walk out of the smoke and hand Detective Reynolds the truth he didn't know he was looking for. This wasn't bravery, you understand. It was luck. A bad hip that kept me sleeping on a folding cot in the garage. Or maybe it was instinct, that little whisper from somewhere deep inside the kind we women learn to trust after decades of being told not to. My late husband Thomas used to say I could smell a lie from a mile away. Maggie's got a nose for bullshit, he'd tell his poker buddies, laughing. Then he'd spend the weekend in Reno and come home smelling like cheap perfume. I guess some things you never lose. The garage had been cold and smelled faintly of motor oil, but it was the only corner of my own home that still felt like mine. David had insisted I move out there while the master bedroom underwent emergency renovations. He'd said it so earnestly, like he was doing me a favor. It's for your safety, Mom. The mold inspection came back terrible. Black mold. Could kill you in your sleep. The renovations never started. The bedroom door stayed locked, and through the crack underneath I could see boxes stacked high. None of them mine. He was moving me out one piece at a time, and I'd been too tired or too foolish to stop it. Now, standing in the November cold at 4:47 a.m., I watched the fire department work. These brave men and women moving with heartbreaking precision to save a life they thought was already lost. I stayed hidden behind Barbara's hedge smoke curling into my gray hair. I must have looked like a ghost. Detective Reynolds James, though he'd never asked me to call him that, circled the property. I'd met him last year when someone broke into my garage and stole Thomas's tool collection. James had been kind, patient. He'd actually listened when I described each missing wrench. Now he would listen again. I stepped out from behind the hedge as the first light broke over the horizon. "Excuse me," I said. My voice came out like gravel. He turned, startled. Then his training kicked in, assessing me, categorizing me. Survivor witness, confused neighbor. "I'm Margaret Sullivan," I said, stronger now. "That's my house. They said I died." I held out the camera. "I didn't. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not the fire, not the locked doors, but to a Tuesday afternoon in late April when my son came home. It was 2:34 p.m., I remember, because I'd been watching The Price is Right, and Drew Carey had just revealed the showcase. The doorbell rang during the commercial break. David stood on my porch with 2 suitcases and a smile I hadn't seen since he was 12 years old. Before Thomas started taking him to toughen up at the gym. Before the piano lessons stopped and the baseball practice started. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Can I come home for a while?" What mother says no to that? He told me Jennifer had left him. Just walked out 3 weeks ago, he said. Took half the furniture and all the good kitchen knives. He needed time to figure things out. I made up the guest room that night. Put fresh sheets on the bed, the blue ones he'd always liked as a kid. Even bought his favorite cereal, Frosted Mini Wheats, at Safeway the next morning. For the first week, it was almost nice. He'd join me for Jeopardy at 7:30, help with the dishes. We'd talk about little things, the weather, the neighbors, that pothole on Sycamore Street the city still hadn't fixed. But then I started noticing things. The way he'd answer his phone and immediately walk outside. How he'd come home from job interviews without ever telling me where they were. The stack of mail he kept moving from the counter to his room bills, I assumed, but he never opened them in front of me. And the questions. So many questions. Mom, where do you keep your insurance paperwork? Mom, did you and Dad ever update your will after he passed? Mom, do you have a safety deposit box? What bank? Just being prepared, he'd say with that quick, empty smile. You're getting older. These things are important. I'm 68 years old. Not ancient, not senile, not yet anyway. But I played along. I told myself he was being responsible, that Jennifer leaving had made him think about family, about security, about taking care of his aging mother. I wanted to believe that so badly, I ignored what my gut was screaming. Then came the afternoon I found my will missing. It was a Thursday. I'd gone to put my quarterly property tax statement in the file cabinet where I'd kept important documents for 20 years. The will wasn't there. Neither was the life insurance policy Thomas had set up before he died. I searched for 2 hours, turned my little home office upside down. That night, David came home at 9:15 p.m., smelling like whiskey and something else. Cigarettes, maybe. He'd quit smoking 10 years ago. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea getting cold in front of me. David, I said carefully, have you seen my will? He barely looked up from his phone. Your what? My will. The one your father and I drew up in 2003. It's missing from the file cabinet. Now he looked at me. Something flickered across his face too fast for me to read. Mom, you probably just misplaced it. You know how you are with paperwork. How I am with paperwork, I was a high school secretary for 30 years. I filed paperwork for 200 students every semester without a single mistake. I didn't misplace it, David. He set his phone down, leaned back in his chair. Okay, Mom, I'll help you look for it tomorrow. I'm sure it's around here somewhere. But the next morning, there it was, back in the file cabinet exactly where I'd already checked 3 times, on top of everything else, like someone had just returned it. I opened it anyway just to be sure. The beneficiary page had been changed. Photocopied, I realized looking closer. The original name David, yes, but split everything 70-30 between him and the Riverside Children's Hospital, Thomas's favorite charity. This version said 100% to David. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but I never signed this. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the document down. I wanted to confront him, to march into his room and demand the truth. But something stopped me. That same instinct that made me count Thomas's poker chips when he came home. That made me check his truck's odometer against his business trip mileage. The instinct that keeps you alive when you realize you're married to a liar. So instead, I took a picture with my phone, the one luxury I'd splurged on last Christmas, an iPhone 12, because David said I needed to stay connected. I uploaded it to the cloud, something my former student, Melissa Chen, had taught me at the library's senior tech class. Then I put the will back and said nothing. That afternoon, I went to Value Electronics on Madison Avenue. The young man behind the counter, Kyle, his name tag said, barely looked at me when I walked in. Can I help you? He didn't look up from his phone. I need a security camera, I sassy said. Something small, something I can monitor from my phone. Now he looked at me, probably wondering what an old lady needed with surveillance equipment. For package theft, I added quickly. They've been stealing from porches in my neighborhood. He perked up. Commission, probably. We've got the Wyze Cam V3, $60. Night vision motion detection connects to your phone via Wi-Fi. Pretty easy to set up. $60, a third of my grocery budget for the month. But I had Thomas's emergency cash hidden in the garage, money David didn't know about. I'll take it, I said. Kyle rang me up, barely explaining how it worked. I asked him to repeat the Wi-Fi setup process 3 times. Let him think I was a technologically challenged old woman. Better that than the truth I was a woman who'd taught basic programming to high schoolers in 1987, who'd set up the school's first computer lab, who knew exactly what she was doing. I went home and installed the camera in the garage that night while David was out at another interview. I angled it just so, catching the kitchen door, the back entrance, and part of the driveway. Then I downloaded the app and tested it. Perfect. 3 days later, on a Tuesday night at 11:47 p.m., the camera caught David entering the kitchen with someone I'd never seen before. The motion alert on my phone woke me at 11:52 p.m. I grabbed the iPhone from my makeshift nightstand and overturned milk crate and opened the Wise app with shaking fingers. My reading glasses were somewhere in the dark, so I held the screen close to my face. 2 figures moved through my kitchen. David and a man I didn't recognize. The stranger was tall-built like he worked construction. Or prison. Barbed wire tattoos wrapped around both forearms. I could just make them out when he reached for a beer from my fridge. He moved like he owned the place. I turned the volume up slightly, holding the phone close to my ear. "Sure about this?" The stranger's voice was rough, smoker's rasp. "Keep your voice down, Brett." David glanced toward the hallway leading to what used to be my bedroom. "She's asleep." I checked. "Brett." I filed the name away. "This is a big fucking deal, David. You know what Kane will do if—" "I know," David cut him off. "That's why we're doing this. I don't have a choice." Kane. Another name. Brett pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. "The insurance appraiser comes next week. You got the documents ready?" David nodded, opened a kitchen drawer, my junk drawer where I kept twist ties and old birthday candles, and pulled out a manila folder. "The updated policy. $680,000. I forged her signature last month." My breath caught in my throat. "And the life insurance?" Brett asked. $200,000. I'm the sole beneficiary now. Was easy enough to change once I had her power of attorney. I didn't have a power of attorney. David had asked me to sign some routine paperwork 2 weeks ago. I'd refused, said I wanted my lawyer to look at it first. He'd gotten angry. Actually raised his voice, something he never did. Then apologized immediately, said stress from the divorce was getting to him. Now I understood. "When?" Brett asked. David took a long drink from his beer, set it down carefully on my Formica counter. "Soon. Before she talks to anyone. Before she figures out what I did with the deed." The deed. To my house. The house Thomas and I bought in 1982 for $47,000. Worth probably $650,000 now, according to the Zillow estimate David had pulled up on my computer last month. "You got somewhere to stay after—" Brett was scrolling through his phone again. "My buddy Marcus has a place in Phoenix. Cheap rent, no questions. Kane's gonna want his cut first." "He'll get it," David snapped. "Every fucking dollar I owe him, plus interest." I sat frozen on my cot, the phone screen illuminating my face in the dark. My son, my baby boy, the child I'd rocked to sleep 1,000 times, who'd cried in my arms when his hamster died in 3rd grade. He was planning to steal my house, my insurance money, my life insurance. The only way you collect life insurance is if someone dies. The conversation continued, but I couldn't hear it anymore over the pounding of my heart. They left 20 minutes later, Brett's truck rumbling down the quiet street. I sat in the dark until dawn, watching the recording over and over. At 6:15 a.m., I made a decision. I opened my laptop, the old Dell that still ran Windows 7, and created a new Gmail account. Not my regular one that David knew. A fresh one, Maggie Sullivan 1956 backup at gmail.com. Then I uploaded the video file to Google Drive. Shared it with my lawyer's email, Patricia Reeves, who'd handled Thomas's estate. Added a message, "Patricia, if anything happens to me, please watch this video and contact the police immediately. I'm not being paranoid. I'm being careful. Maggie." I hit send at 6:43 a.m. David came out of his room at 7:00, stretching and yawning like he'd slept peacefully. "Morning, Mom. Want me to make breakfast?" I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my son's face. "That would be lovely," I said. We ate scrambled eggs and toast together, making small talk about the weather. He told me about a job lead at a real estate office downtown. I told him about the hydrangeas needing pruning. All the while I thought about what I'd heard. About Kane, whoever he was. About the debt. About the barbed wire tattoos on Brett's arms and the way David had said I don't have a choice. I'd been married to an addict long enough to recognize the signs. Thomas's addiction was poker and blackjack. What was David's after breakfast while he showered? I did something I never thought I'd do. I went into his room. The guilt hit me immediately. This was my child's private space. Even at 42, he deserved privacy. But then I remembered, she's probably asleep. I checked. I opened his laptop. No password. Stupid. I taught him better than that. His email was already open. I scrolled quickly, my heart hammering. There. An email from M. Kane dated 3 weeks ago. David, your payment is 60 days overdue. $320,000 plus interest. You know what happens to people who don't pay. The Riverside job is your last chance. Don't fuck it up. Riverside. My address was 847 Riverside Drive. I heard the shower turn off. Quickly, I snapped a photo of the screen with my phone. Closed the laptop. Slipped out of his room just as the bathroom door opened. Mom, David called out. You okay? I was standing in the hallway, frozen. Just fine, honey, I said, forcing my voice steady. Thought I heard a bird hit the window. He bought it, or pretended to. That afternoon, I went to the Riverside Public Library, used their computer instead of mine, Googled Marcus Kane Riverside. The first result made my blood run cold. Marcus Kane, age 54, arrested in 2019 for loan sharking and racketeering, released on a technicality, known associate of the Ramirez crime family. David owed money to the mob, and I was his way out. The mold inspector arrived on a Wednesday morning in early May. His name was Terry, supposedly from Safe Home Environmental Services. He had a clipboard, an official-looking badge, though when I looked closely, the company logo looked like it had been printed on a home inkjet. David stood beside him in my bedroom doorway, arms crossed. Mom, you should really wait in the living room. The spores can be dangerous. I'd already looked up Safe Home Environmental Services. No website, no business license registered with the county, no reviews on Yelp or Google, but I played along. Of course, I said, shuffled out to the living room like a good, obedient old lady. They were in there for 45 minutes. I could hear them moving around, talking in low voices. At one point, I heard David actually laugh at something Terry said. When they emerged, Terry's face was professionally grave. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm afraid I have bad news. You've got toxic black mold throughout your bedroom, behind the walls under the floorboards. This is serious stuff. How serious? I asked, letting my voice quaver. Life-threatening if you continue sleeping in there. I'm surprised you haven't had respiratory issues already. He handed me a pamphlet. We recommend immediate remediation. In the meantime, you'll need to sleep elsewhere. The guest room, I started. Also contaminated, Terry interrupted. The spores spread through the ventilation system. I'd recommend sleeping away from the main house entirely. Do you have a garage A shed? Of course. The garage. The one room they wanted me isolated in. I can set up a cot, David offered quickly. Just for a few weeks, Mom, until we get this fixed. I looked at the pamphlet. The photos of mold looked horrifying, black tendrils spreading across drywall. But the bottom of the page had a typo, Safe Home Environmental Services. They couldn't even proofread their fake documents. How much will the remediation cost? I asked. Terry glanced at David. Probably $30,000, maybe more. Your homeowner's insurance should cover it. My insurance had a $5,000 deductible. I knew that. David knew that. This was about getting me out of the bedroom, out of the main house, out of the way. I'll need to think about it, I said carefully. David's face tightened. Just for a second. Mom, this isn't really something you think about. It's dangerous. We need to act now. Your son's right, Mrs. Sullivan. Terry was already packing up his equipment. Every day you wait, the spores multiply. I can schedule the remediation crew for next week. Let me talk to my insurance company first, I said. Mom. I said I'll think about it, David. I let some steel creep into my voice. The voice I'd used when he was 15 and tried to sneak out past curfew. This is still my house. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Terry left quickly after that. David stayed in his room the rest of the day. That evening, I called a real mold inspector, paid $200 out of Thomas's emergency fund for a same-day appointment. Michael Rodriguez from American Mold Inspection came at 6 p.m. while David was out. He was thorough. Checked the bedroom, the walls, the ventilation system. Took samples. 45 minutes later, he found me in the kitchen. Mrs. Sullivan, I've got good news. Your home is completely clean. No mold. Not even the normal amount you'd expect in a house this age. I'd known, but hearing it confirmed made something crack inside my chest. Are you sure? I asked, though I didn't need to. Positive. I checked everywhere your son mentioned. Even used a moisture meter and an infrared camera. If there was mold, I'd find it. He paused. Did someone tell you there was mold here? A different inspector. Last week. Michael frowned. You might want to file a complaint. False mold reports are illegal in California. It's a scam some companies run to sell unnecessary remediation, or to isolate an old woman in her garage. Thank you, Michael, I said. How much do I owe you? 200, but I'm including a written report. You'll want that if you need to dispute anything. I paid him in cash. Took the report to the garage after he left. That night I moved into the garage, temporarily. Let David think he'd won. I set up the folding cot Thomas used for camping trips, hung a battery-powered lantern from the rafters, brought out my warmest blankets and a space heater. The Wyze camera watched from its perch on the shelf, its little blue light blinking occasionally, recording everything. David helped me move a few boxes. He seemed relieved. It's just for a few weeks, Mom. Promise. I know, honey, I said. That was May 15th. The renovations never started. By May 30th, I'd been sleeping in the garage for 2 weeks. The boxes in my bedroom had multiplied. I could see them through the window banker's boxes taped shut. My own belongings had been relegated to the garage shelves, photo albums, Thomas's old sweaters, the china we got as a wedding present. I was being moved out of my own home one box at a time, and David thought I didn't notice. By early June, I'd become an expert in surveillance. Not by choice, by necessity. The Wyze camera had captured 12 separate visits from Brett over the last month. Sometimes he came during the day when David thought I was at the library or the grocery store. Sometimes at night, long after I'd supposedly gone to sleep. They were getting comfortable, careless. On June 8th, the camera caught them unrolling blueprints on my kitchen table. I watched the footage the next morning, sitting in the garage with my phone, the volume turned low. This is the main electrical panel. Brett pointed to something on the blueprint. House this old, it's probably still got aluminum wiring. Perfect accelerant. Fire will look natural. My hands went numb. David said something I couldn't hear. Don't go soft on me now, Brett said. You owe Kane $320,000. He's already sent Jimmy to the hospital for owing less. You want that to be you? David shook his head. Then we do this my way. Brett rolled up the blueprints. I've done this before, 4 times. Never been caught. They call it accidental electrical fire. Insurance pays out no questions. What about, David gestured vaguely toward the garage, toward me. What about her? Brett's laugh was cold. Old people die in house fires all the time. Tragic but not suspicious, especially with faulty wiring. She's my mother. David's voice cracked. She's also $800,000 in insurance and equity. You do the math. I watched this twice, 3 times, saved it to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I did something that surprised even me. I went to the police station, not to file a report, not yet. I needed more, concrete evidence, something undeniable, but I could lay groundwork. Detective James Reynolds was at his desk, drowning in paperwork. He'd put on weight since solving my garage break-in last year. Too many nights at his desk, probably. Mrs. Sullivan. He stood surprised but pleasant. What brings you here? I need advice, Detective. Off the record. His expression shifted. He gestured to a chair. Of course. I sat choosing my words carefully. If someone were planning something illegal, something that might harm another person, and you had video evidence of them discussing it, but they hadn't acted yet, what would you do? James leaned back, studying me. Is someone threatening you, Mrs. Sullivan? Not directly, not yet. Is this someone you know? I met his eyes. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, if someone is planning to harm you, we can investigate. But conspiracy is hard to prove without concrete action or direct threats. The video would help, but... He paused. Is this family? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Mrs. Sullivan, if you're in danger... I'm being careful, I said. I just wanted to know what my options were, hypothetically. He pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. This is my personal cell. If anything happens, and I mean anything, you call me. Day or night. Understand? I took the card. Nodded. I'm serious, Mrs. Sullivan. Don't wait until it's too late. I left the station with the card in my pocket and a plan forming in my mind. I wouldn't just record them talking. I'd record them acting. And when they did, I'd have enough evidence to bury them both. The night of August 10th changed everything. I'd been in the garage for almost 3 months by then. Summer in California meant temperatures hitting 95 during the day, cooling to a bearable 70 at night. The space heater sat unused in the corner. Instead, I ran a box fan I'd bought at Target pointed directly at my cot. David had settled into a routine. He'd check on me around 9 p.m., a cursory, "You okay, Mom? Need anything?" then disappear into the house. I'd hear his TV through the walls until about 10:30. Then silence. That's when the real visits happened. I was reading a Barbara Kingsolver novel on my phone. The library app was a godsend when the Wise motion alert buzzed. 11:47 p.m. Brett's truck was in the driveway. I put the phone on silent volume up and watched. They didn't even bother with pretense anymore. Brett walked straight in through the kitchen door. David was waiting with 2 beers already open. "You got the updated policy?" Brett asked, no greeting. David handed him a folder. "Appraised at $680 $1,000. I signed it myself. They never verify the signature for routine policy updates." Brett flipped through the pages. "And the life insurance, $200,000. Sole beneficiary." David's voice was flat, empty. "Kane wants confirmation of the timeline. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I need to move some money around first. Make it look like I wasn't here when it happens." My heart stopped. 2 weeks. Brett set down the folder, pulled out his phone, showed David something. "This is how we do it. Electrical fire. I cut the main breaker first so the smoke detectors don't go off. Then I rig the panel to short circuit. Sparks flame, whole house goes up in 30 minutes. The garage," David started. "The garage doesn't touch the main house except for one shared wall. We make sure the fire doesn't spread there. You don't need her body, just the house gone and her missing. Insurance will presume death after 7 years, but the house payout is immediate." 7 years. They were planning to let me disappear. David took a long drink. "What if she wakes up, tries to get out?" Brett's smile made my blood run cold. "That's why you gave her those sleeping pills, remember? Tell her it's for her hip pain. She'll be out cold." Sleeping pills. The pain medication David had been bringing me for the last week. Small white tablets, he said, were prescription-strength Tylenol from his doctor. I'd been flushing them down the toilet. "I can't," David's voice broke. "She's my mother, Brett. She raised me. She's also the reason you're in debt up to your eyeballs. If she'd just given you the money when you asked—" "I never asked." David slammed his beer down. "I couldn't. She would have wanted to know why. She would have found out about your gambling problem, about the $200,000 you lost at Kane's poker games. Yeah, she probably would have. Gambling, just like Thomas." "Look," Brett said, his voice softening. "I know this is hard, but Kane doesn't do payment plans. He does collections, and collections means broken bones at best, a body in the desert at worst. You've got 1 shot to pay him off. This is it." David was quiet for a long time. Then, "When September 28th, weekend, neighbors will assume she's asleep. Fire department won't arrive for at least 15 minutes after the alarm is triggered. By then," he made a gesture, "poof. I'll need an alibi," David said. "Already handled. You'll be at my place in Riverside playing poker with 6 witnesses. All guys who owe Kane favors. They'll swear you were there all night." They talked for another hour, about details, about timing, about what David would say to the police, how he'd discover the fire, how he'd play the grieving son. I recorded all of it. When Brett finally left at 1:23 a.m., David stayed in the kitchen. I watched him through the camera, sitting alone at the table, his head in his hands. He was crying. Good, I thought. At least he still has a soul to sell. The next morning, David brought me coffee and toast in the garage. "Morning, Mom. How'd you sleep?" "Like the dead," I said. He flinched, just slightly. I sipped my coffee black the way I'd always drunk it and watched him over the rim of the mug. This man, this stranger, my son. "David," I said carefully, "if you ever need money, for any reason, you know you can ask me, right?" His face went carefully blank. "I'm fine, Mom. Why would you think I need money?" "Just saying. You're my son. If you were in trouble, I'd want to help." For a moment, just one moment, I saw something in his eyes. Regret, shame, maybe even hope. Then it was gone. "I'm not in trouble," he said. "Everything's fine." He left the garage, closing the door behind him. I sat on my cot drinking cold coffee and made my final preparations. September 28th was 7 weeks away. I had work to do. September 28th arrived with unseasonably warm weather. The thermometer on the garage wall read 82 degrees at 5:30 p.m. Indian summer, they called it. That last gasp of heat before autumn settled in for good. I'd spent the day preparing. Not for dinner, that was David's responsibility, but for what came after. 3 USB drives sat in my coat pocket, each containing copies of every video, every recording, every piece of evidence I'd collected over the last 5 months. One I'd already mailed to Patricia Reeves, my lawyer, with explicit instructions, open only if something happens to me. The second I'd hidden in Pat Morrison's garage yesterday, tucked inside an old paint can she never used. I'd told her I was storing some important documents, and could she keep them safe, Pat didn't ask questions. Good neighbors never do. The third stayed with me. I'd also written letters. 4 of them. One to David, though I doubted he'd ever read it. One to Detective Reynolds, explaining everything in case the videos weren't enough. One to my granddaughter Emma David's daughter from his first marriage, who I hadn't seen in 6 years since Jennifer took her to Oregon after the divorce. And one to myself. A reminder of who I was before tonight, before everything changed. I sealed them all in a waterproof bag and buried it in the garden beneath the oak tree where Thomas's ashes rested. If I died tonight, someone would find them eventually. If I lived, I'd dig them up myself. At 6:15 p.m., I heard David's car pull into the driveway. He'd been gone since morning. Running errands, he'd said. I knew better. He was establishing his alibi, making sure he was seen at enough places that his timeline would hold up under police scrutiny. The kitchen door opened, closed. I heard him moving around unpacking something. At 6:30, he knocked on the garage door. "Mom, dinner's ready. I made your favorite." My favorite, as if he remembered. I opened the door. David stood there in a clean button-down shirt, khakis pressed. He'd shaved, put on cologne, the expensive kind Thomas used to wear on special occasions. He looked like he was going to a funeral. "Lasagna," he said, gesturing toward the house. "The kind with the ricotta cheese you like. And I got a bottle of wine. Nothing fancy, just some Chianti from Trader Joe's." I followed him into the kitchen. The house smelled wrong, like cleaning products and air freshener. He'd scrubbed everything. Wiped away fingerprints, probably. Evidence. The dining room table was set for 2. Real plates, not the paper ones we'd been using. Cloth napkins. Candles in the hurricane holders I'd bought at a garage sale 20 years ago. "This is lovely, David," I said, sitting down. He served the lasagna store-bought, I could tell by the perfect edges, and poured 2 glasses of wine. His hands shook slightly. He hid it by immediately picking up his fork. We ate in silence for several minutes. The only sound was silverware scraping on plates and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Thomas's clock. It had belonged to his father, and his father before that. David had asked about selling it last month. Said it was worth good money to collectors. I'd said no. "How's the lasagna?" David asked, finally, not meeting my eyes. "It's good, thank you." More silence. I could feel him building up to something. The way a storm builds on the horizon, dark clouds gathering, air pressure dropping. You can't see it yet, but you know it's coming. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something." Here it was. I set down my fork, folded my hands in my lap like a good mother waiting to hear her son's confession. "Of course, honey. What is it?" He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Cream-colored expensive paper, the kind lawyers use. "I need you to sign something. It's just routine paperwork. For your protection." "What kind of paperwork? Power of attorney?" "Just a general one in case anything happens to you, so I can make medical decisions, handle your finances, that sort of thing." His voice was smooth, practiced. He'd rehearsed this. I took the envelope. Inside were 3 pages of legal text, dense and intimidating. But I'd seen power of attorney documents before. I knew what they said. This one gave David control over everything. My bank accounts, my property, my medical care. The power to move me into a nursing home if he deemed it necessary. The power to sell my house without my consent. "This seems very comprehensive," I said carefully. "Well, you're getting older, Mom. 68 isn't ancient, but things can happen. What if you have a stroke or dementia? Someone needs to be able to make decisions. I could just update my will. Name you executor. This is better, more flexible." He refilled my wine glass, even though I'd barely touched it. "Come on, Mom. Just sign it. I'm trying to help you here." The temperature in the room dropped. His voice had an edge now, the mask slipping. I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become this person? Was it gradual, like erosion wearing down a riverbank? Or had there been a moment, a single choice, where he decided that money mattered more than his mother's life? "I'd like my lawyer to review it first," I said quietly. David's fork clattered against his plate. "Jesus Christ, Mom. Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" "I'm not trying to be difficult. You just want to control everything. You always have." He was standing now, his chair scraping back. "Dad warned me about this. Said you'd never let me grow up, never let me make my own decisions." "Your father said a lot of things." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Most of them after 3 whiskeys." David's face went red. "Don't you dare talk about Dad like that." "Like what, honestly?" I stood to, my napkin falling to the floor. "Your father was a gambling addict who lost $50,000 of our retirement savings at poker tables in Reno. I had to go back to work at 60 to make up the difference. That's who your father was, David. At least he didn't treat me like a child." "I don't treat you like a child. I treat you like someone who's been lying to me for 5 months." The silence that followed was deafening. David's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, fear, calculation, finally settling on something that looked like innocence. "What are you talking about?" "The mold inspection that never found mold. The will you changed without my permission. The life insurance policy with your forged signature." I kept my voice steady. "Should I go on?" He sat down slowly, his whole body rigid. "Mom, I'm not senile, David. I'm not stupid. And I'm not blind." I walked to the kitchen counter, picked up my purse, pulled out one of the USB drives. "I know what you're planning." His face went white. "I know about Brett. I know about Marcus Kane. I know about the $320,000 you owe from gambling." I set the USB drive on the table between us. "And I know what you were planning to do tonight." David stared at the small black device like it was a bomb. You were recording us every visit, every conversation, every time you and Brett discussed burning down my house with me inside it." His breathing had gone shallow, panicked. "Mom, please, you don't understand. Kane will kill me. He'll actually kill me." "So your solution was to kill me first?" "No, God, no. I wasn't going to." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I was going to make sure you got out. I swear. I was going to call you, wake you up, tell you to leave. You were going to drug me. Those pain pills you've been bringing, Brett said they were sleeping pills." David's face crumpled. He put his head in his hands. For a long moment, the only sound was his ragged breathing. "I'm so fucked," he whispered. "I'm so completely fucked." "Yes," I said. "You are." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "What are you going to do?" I picked up the USB drive, put it back in my purse. "I'm going to sleep in the garage tonight, just like I have for the last 4 months. And tomorrow morning we're both going to find out what happens when you try to burn down your mother's house." "Mom, please." "Sleep tight, David." I turned toward the door. "I'll see you in the morning." I walked out of the house across the driveway and into the garage, closed the door, locked it from the inside with the deadbolt I'd installed 3 weeks ago. Then I sat on my cot and waited. At 8:47 p.m., I heard David's car start. Drive away. He was going to Brett's, to tell him the plan had fallen apart, that I knew everything. They had 2 choices now, abort the plan or accelerate it. I was betting on the latter. I texted Detective Reynolds, "If you don't hear from me by 6 a.m. tomorrow, come to 847 Riverside Drive. Bring backup." His response came 30 seconds later. "Are you safe right now, for now? But check your email. I sent you files, just in case. Mrs. Sullivan, if you're in immediate danger, I'm prepared. Trust me." I turned off my phone, saved the battery. Then I sat in the dark and waited for my son to make his choice. At 10:47 p.m., I heard a car approach. Not David's sedan, something bigger. A truck. Brett. I moved to the small window on the side of the garage, the one that faced the driveway, peeked through the dusty glass. Brett's pickup idled at the curb, lights off. David got out of the passenger side. They stood in the street having a conversation I couldn't hear. David was gesturing, animated. Upset. Brett grabbed his shoulder, said something. David shook his head. Brett pulled out his phone, showed David something on the screen. Even from this distance, I could see David's face change. Terror, pure and simple. Brett put the phone away, opened his truck bed, pulled out 2 red gas cans. David stood frozen for a moment. Then he nodded. Once. They were going through with it. My heart rate spiked. I forced myself to breathe slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The way Thomas taught me during my panic attacks after his father died. Stay calm, stick to the plan. I checked my phone, 4% battery left. I deliberately let it drain, conserving power for the Wyze camera. The small security camera sat on its shelf, its night vision activated, recording everything through the window. Brett and David walked toward the house. Brett handed David one of the gas cans. They disappeared around the back. 10:52 p.m. I could hear them now. Footsteps on the back porch. The kitchen door opening, David had left it unlocked. Smart. No broken windows, no forced entry. Nothing suspicious. I moved to my cot. Lay down fully clothed jeans sweatshirt. Thomas's old raincoat folded beside me. My purse with the USB drive, my phone, and $300 in emergency cash sat within arm's reach. The Wyze app was open on my phone. I watched the camera feed with the sound turned almost to 0. They were in the kitchen now. I could see them on the screen, 2 shadowy figures moving with purpose. Brett pulled out a screwdriver, started working on the electrical panel. David stood by the window looking out toward the garage. Looking at me. I held my breath. "She's in there," David said. His voice came through tinny on the phone speaker. "Maybe we should what?" Brett didn't look up from the electrical panel. "Let her call the cops. Let Kane send someone after your daughter in Portland." "Emma." They'd threatened Emma. "He wouldn't." "He would. He did it to Rodriguez last year. Burned down the guy's ex-wife's house with their kid inside." Brett closed the panel. 9 years old. Girl named Sophia. David made a sound like he'd been punched. "So here's what's going to happen," Brett continued. "We're going to pour gasoline on the porch, the hallway, the living room. We're going to make it look like faulty wiring started it. And you're going to be at my place playing poker when it happens, just like we planned. But Mom will probably die of smoke inhalation before the fire reaches her. Peaceful. Better than what Kane will do to you." A long pause. "What about the garage?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "Fire won't reach it. Separate structure, remember? They'll find her body in the rubble of the main house. Medical examiner will say smoke inhalation. Insurance will pay out. Kane gets his money. You get to live." Brett picked up his gas can. "Now help me." I watched them work. They moved methodically, professionally. Brett had done this before, that much was clear. He knew exactly where to pour the gasoline, how much to use, where to create the best draft for the flames to spread. David moved like a zombie, following orders, pouring gas on the back steps, the kitchen floor, the hallway leading to my old bedroom. At 11:23 p.m., Brett pulled out a road flare. "Wait," David said. "Just wait." "For what?" "I want to check on her. One more time." Brett laughed. "Check on her? You planning to say goodbye?" "I just want to make sure she's asleep. That she won't." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Fine. Make it quick." David walked toward the garage. I could hear his footsteps on the gravel driveway. I closed my eyes, slowed my breathing, made myself perfectly still. The garage door handle turned. Locked. David knocked. Softly. "Mom, you awake?" I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock. "Mom?" Silence. I heard him walk around to the side window, the same window I'd been watching from. I'd closed the curtain 5 minutes ago, knowing he'd check. His footsteps retreated. "She's asleep," he told Brett. "Lights are off. Doors locked from inside." "Good. Now get in my truck and get out of here. I'll light it in 5 minutes, give you time to establish your alibi." "You're sure the fire won't reach the garage?" "I'm sure. Now go." I heard David's footsteps, running. Brett's truck door opened-closed. The engine started. Drove away. Brett was alone now. I checked my phone, 2% battery. Through the camera feed, I watched Brett walk back into the house. He stood in the kitchen, surveying his work. Gas glistened on every surface. He pulled out his phone, made a call. "It's done," he said. "Light it in 10. I'll be 3 blocks away when it goes up." He listened to whoever was on the other end. "No, she's in the garage. Separate structure. She'll die from smoke, not burns. Cleaner that way." Another pause. Yeah, the kid's taking it hard, but he'll get over it. They always do. Brett ended the call, struck the road flare. The bright red flame illuminated his face, calm, professional, bored. He dropped it in the kitchen. The gasoline caught instantly. The flames were beautiful in a terrible way. I watched through the garage window as orange light bloomed across my kitchen ceiling. The fire moved fast, faster than I'd expected. Gasoline burns hot and hungry. Within seconds, the kitchen was engulfed. The flames licked up the walls, catching on the curtains I'd sewn myself 30 years ago. Yellow gingham. Thomas had hated them, said they looked like a farmhouse, but I'd kept them anyway. Now they were ash. The fire moved into the hallway. I could see the orange glow spreading, illuminating rooms I'd lived in for 43 years. The living room where we'd opened Christmas presents. The dining room where we'd celebrated David's birthdays. The bedroom where Thomas died in his sleep 3 years ago, peaceful despite everything. All of it burning. I should have felt something. Horror, grief, loss. Instead, I felt numb. My phone vibrated. 1% battery. The Wyze camera would keep recording on its own internal battery, uploading to the cloud as long as the Wi-Fi held. Through the window, I saw Brett's truck drive past. Slowly, checking his work. The front windows exploded from the heat. Glass shattered, falling like rain. The fresh oxygen fed the fire, making it roar louder. Now I felt something. Anger. This was my home, mine and Thomas's. We'd scraped together the down payment by working double shifts. I'd taught summer school for 3 years straight to afford new windows. Thomas had installed the kitchen cabinets himself, spending weekends measuring and cutting and cursing when things didn't fit right. And David had burned it down for $800,000 in the cancellation of a gambling debt. At 11:47 p.m., I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? Fire! I said, my voice hoarse from the smoke starting to seep through the walls. 847 Riverside Drive. The house is on fire. Are you inside the structure, ma'am? I'm in the garage, separate building, but the main house is fully engulfed. Is anyone else in the house? No, it's empty. Ma'am, I need you to evacuate immediately. Can you exit the garage safely? I looked out the window. The driveway was clear. The fire hadn't jumped to the garage yet. Brett had been right about that. The main house and garage shared one wall, but it was brick, fire-resistant. I can get out, I said. Then do it now. Go to the street, away from the structure. Fire department is on the way. ETA 7 minutes. I hung up. 7 minutes. Long enough. I grabbed my purse, the USB drive, Thomas's raincoat. Slipped my phone into my pocket. The Wyze camera stayed on its shelf, recording faithfully. I opened the garage door and stepped out into the smoke. The heat hit me immediately, waves of it rolling off the burning house. The air tasted like chemicals and melting plastic. My eyes watered. I pulled the raincoat around myself and walked toward Barbara Morrison's hedge across the street. The smoke was thick enough that I could move without being seen, a ghost in the darkness. From Barbara's front yard, I had a perfect view of everything. The house was a total loss now. Flames shot through the roof, reaching 30 feet into the night sky. Sparks drifted like fireflies. The grandfather clock's chiming suddenly cut off. The fire had reached the hallway. Neighbors started emerging from their houses. First Barbara in her bathrobe and slippers. Then the Chens from next door. The Rodriguezes. Old Mr. Patterson from the corner who'd lived on Riverside Drive for 50 years. They gathered in small groups, pointing at the fire, talking in hushed voices. Is anyone inside? Mrs. Chen asked. I don't think so, Barbara said. Maggie's been sleeping in the garage since May. Something about renovations. Oh, God. Mrs. Chen covered her mouth. Where is she? Barbara looked toward the garage. It stood untouched, but smoke billowed around it. I don't see her. Maybe she got out. Someone should check, Mr. Patterson said. No one moved. The heat was too intense. At 11:54 p.m., the first fire truck arrived. Firefighters spilled out, moving with practiced precision. Hoses unrolled. Water arced through the air. Radio chatter filled the night command status updates, requests for backup. The battalion chief, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back tight, surveyed the scene. Spoke into her radio. Fully involved single-family residence. Defensive operations only. Check for occupants in attached structures. 2 firefighters headed for the garage. I watched them break down the door I'd carefully locked. They swept through with flashlights, checking every corner. Clear, one of them shouted. No occupants. The battalion chief frowned, spoke to Barbara. Ma'am, do you know who lives here? Margaret Sullivan, Maggie. She's 68, lives alone since her husband passed. Was she home tonight? I think so. I saw her earlier going into the garage. She's been staying out there. The chief's expression changed. She grabbed her radio. Be advised, potential victim. 68-year-old female last seen in garage. Garage is clear, possible location unknown. Expand search. I heard sirens, more fire trucks, an ambulance, a police car. Detective Reynolds stepped out of an unmarked sedan at 12:07 a.m. I knew he'd come. I'd texted him hours ago. And James Reynolds was the kind of cop who took check on me seriously, even when it came from an old woman he'd helped once with a garage break-in. He found the battalion chief, flashed his badge, spoke to her urgently. She pointed toward the garage, toward the neighbors clustered in small groups. Then she pointed at where my house used to be. James's face went gray. He pulled out his phone, tried calling someone, hung up, tried again. He was calling me. My phone was in my pocket, but I'd turned it off to save the last 1% of battery. The Wise camera was still uploading footage. I needed that more than I needed to announce my survival. Not yet. James walked toward the neighbors, started asking questions. I could see Barbara gesturing, explaining about the garage, the renovations, how long I'd been sleeping out there. When did you last see her? James asked. Around 6, maybe. She was having dinner with her son. Barbara turned to Mrs. Chen. You saw David's car, right? Mrs. Chen nodded. Around 6:30. He left maybe 9 o'clock. Her son, James repeated. He pulled out a notebook. David Sullivan. That's him. He's been staying with Maggie since his divorce. Few months now. James wrote something down. Then, is anyone trying to reach him? Tell him about the fire. Barbara pulled out her phone. I have his number. From when I pet-sat Maggie's cat years ago. She dialed. Waited. It's going to voicemail. Of course it was. David was at Brett's house establishing his alibi. At 12:23 a.m., the roof collapsed. The sound was enormous, a roar of timber and tile crashing down into the burning wreckage. Sparks exploded upward, a column of fire reaching toward the stars. Barbara screamed. Mrs. Chen started crying. Oh, God, Barbara sobbed. Maggie was in there. She had to have been in there. The battalion chief put a hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, we'll do a thorough search once it's safe, but you need to prepare yourself. With a fire this intense, if someone was inside... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. I stood in the darkness, wrapped in Thomas's raincoat, and let them mourn me. It felt surreal, like watching my own funeral. These people who'd been my neighbors for decades, crying for me while I stood 30 feet away. Part of me wanted to step out, to tell them I was alive, to stop their grief. But I didn't, because in 15 minutes David would get a phone call. He'd learn his mother's house had burned down, and his reaction, genuine or performed, would tell Detective Reynolds everything he needed to know. At 12:31 a.m., James's phone rang. I watched him answer it. Listen. His face changed from concern to something harder. He walked away from the neighbors toward his car, spoke urgently into the phone. When he hung up, he made 3 more calls in rapid succession. Then he got in his car and drove away. Fast. The fire burned for another hour. By 1:30 a.m., it was mostly out, just scattered flames and smoking rubble. The firefighters had contained it to my property. The garage stood untouched, a lonely sentinel beside the ruins. Barbara brought coffee for the firefighters. Mr. Patterson brought blankets. The Rodriguezes set up lawn chairs in the street. No one went home. They kept vigil, waiting for news about a woman who was already dead in their minds. At 2:15 a.m., I saw car headlights approaching fast. David's sedan. He screeched to a stop in front of the ruins, jumped out, leaving the door open, ran toward the wreckage. Mom! He screamed. Mom! 2 firefighters caught him, held him back. Sir, you can't. That's my mother's house, my mother. He fought them wild-eyed. She was in there. She was... He collapsed, literally fell to his knees in the street. The firefighters crouched beside him. Sir, what's your name? David Sullivan. This is my mom's house. Where is she? Where's my mom? Barbara rushed over. David, honey, we don't know. We haven't seen her. The garage was empty. No. David shook his head. No, she was sleeping in the garage. She's been sleeping there for months. She had to be. His phone rang. He stared at it. Detective Reynolds' name on the screen. David answered with shaking hands. Hello. I couldn't hear James's side of the conversation, but I could see David's face change. Confusion? Fear. Understanding. What do you mean, come to the station? David's voice cracked. My mother just died. I need to. He listened. His face went white. I don't understand. Why do you need to question me? More listening. I was at my friend Brett's house. We were playing poker. There are witnesses. A long pause. I want a lawyer, David said. Then, I want a fucking lawyer. I'm not saying anything else. He hung up, stood slowly, looked at the ruins of my house. Then he looked toward the garage, toward where I'd supposedly been sleeping. For just a moment I thought I saw relief flash across his face, but it was gone so fast I couldn't be sure. At 6:47 a.m., the sun rose over the ruins of my life. I'd been standing in the shadows of Barbara's hedge for 7 hours. My feet ached. My hips screamed. The smoke had settled into my lungs, making every breath taste like ash. But I was alive. The fire had been declared fully extinguished at 4:30 a.m. The arson investigator had arrived at 5:15, a tired-looking man in his 50s named Eric Mason. I'd seen him before at a neighborhood watch meeting last year. Now he walked through the rubble with practiced care, taking photos, collecting samples. He spent 20 minutes examining the electrical panel, what was left of it. Then he found the gas cans. Brett had been careless. He'd left them in the garage, the one structure that didn't burn. Probably figured they'd be destroyed with everything else. Eric photographed them from every angle, made notes, called someone. By 6:00 a.m., there were 3 police cars on my street. Detective Reynolds was back along with 2 uniforms and a woman in a suit I didn't recognize. FBI maybe, or district attorney's office. They cordoned off the property, started treating it as a crime scene. David sat on the curb, his head in his hands. No one had let him leave. For your protection, one officer had said. But I knew better. They were keeping him close, watching him. At 6:30 a.m., Barbara brought more coffee. She sat next to David, put a hand on his shoulder. I'm so sorry, honey, she said. Your mom was a wonderful woman. David didn't respond, just stared at the ruins. Did they find her? Barbara asked quietly. Not yet. They said it could take days to find. He couldn't finish. Barbara squeezed his shoulder. She wouldn't have suffered. The smoke would have gotten her before the fire. That's what they told us. David nodded, still staring. I watched this from Barbara's hedge and felt nothing. No pity, no guilt, just cold clinical observation. This man had tried to kill me. He'd locked doors, poured gasoline, lit the match. The fact that I'd outsmarted him didn't change his intent. At 6:45 a.m., Eric Mason emerged from the ruins carrying something. A road flare, partially burned but still recognizable. He bagged it, labeled it, showed it to Detective Reynolds. James's expression went hard. He pulled out his phone, made a call. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser arrived. Officers got out, walked straight to David. David Sullivan, one of them said. David looked up. Yes, we need you to come with us, answer some questions. I already told you I was at Brett's. We know where you say you were. We need to verify that. So please stand up. David stood slowly. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. We just need to ask some questions. They led him to the patrol car. He went without resistance, looking back at the ruins one last time. I waited until the car was gone. Then I waited another 30 minutes. At 7:15 a.m., I stepped out of the shadows. Barbara saw me first. She was carrying empty coffee cups back to her house, tired after the long night. She stopped, stared. The cups fell from her hands, crashing on the pavement. Maggie, I walked toward her slowly. My voice came out rough from smoke. Hey, Barbara. Oh my God. Oh my God. She ran to me, pulled me into a hug. You're alive. You're how we thought everyone thought. I know what everyone thought. She pulled back, looking at me like I was a ghost. Where were you? Where have you been? Watching. Detective Reynolds heard the commotion. He turned, saw me, and his entire body went rigid. He walked over quickly, his face a mix of relief and fury. Mrs. Sullivan. His voice was tight. Where the hell have you been? Safe, I said simply. We've had fire crews searching the rubble for your body. We've had your son sitting on that curb for 6 hours thinking you were dead." He paused. "Did you know about this?" "The fire?" I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the USB drive. "I knew." I held it out to him. James took it carefully like it might explode. "What's on this everything? Every conversation, every plan. David and his friend Brett Jameson conspired to burn down my house with me inside it. It's all recorded. Video and audio. The arson investigator had joined us now. So had the woman in the suit. They stared at me like I'd risen from the dead, which I suppose I had. "You recorded them," James said slowly. "You knew they were planning this, and you recorded it." "Yes." "Why didn't you call us sooner?" "Would you have believed me?" I met his eyes. An old woman accusing her son of conspiracy to commit murder based on overheard conversations. I needed proof. Undeniable proof. James was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You could have died, Mrs. Sullivan." "But I didn't." "You let us think you were dead for 7 hours." I needed to see his reaction. I looked toward where David had been sitting. I needed to know if he'd feel any remorse at all. And did he? I thought about David's face, the tears, the collapse in the street, the way he'd stared at the ruins like they held the answer to something. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But it doesn't matter now." The woman in the suit introduced herself. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Deputy District Attorney Karen Chen. I need you to come with me. We need to get your statement while everything's fresh." "Of course." I turned to Barbara, who was still staring at me like I might disappear. "Barbara, could you call Patricia Reeves for me, my lawyer? Tell her I'm all right and I'll call her later." Barbara nodded, speechless. As they led me to James's sedan, I looked back at my house one more time. 43 years of memories reduced to rubble and ash. The kitchen where I'd taught David to make pancakes. The living room where we'd watched him graduate high school on a VHS recording. The bedroom where Thomas had told me he loved me for the last time 3 days before his heart attack. All gone. But I was still here. The interrogation room at Riverside Police Department smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I'd been in rooms like this before, not as a suspect, but as a witness after Thomas's death. They'd wanted to make sure his heart attack was natural, that I hadn't helped a gambling addict to his final rest. Now I sat across from Detective Reynolds and Deputy D.A. Chen, a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee in front of me. They'd offered me a lawyer. I'd declined. "I didn't do anything illegal," I'd said. "I recorded conversations in my own home. That's legal in California." They'd let me keep my USB drive until we reached the station. Smart. If they'd taken it as evidence immediately, I couldn't have used it as leverage. But now it sat in an evidence bag on the table between us. "Walk me through it," James said, "from the beginning." So I did. I told them about David moving home, about the questions, the missing will, the fake mold inspection. I told them about Brett Carlson and Marcus Kane, about the gambling debt and the insurance policies. And I told them about the camera. "You recorded everything?" Chen asked. She'd been taking notes on a legal pad, her handwriting neat and precise. "Everything. 5 months of footage. David and Brett planning the fire, discussing timelines, buying supplies." I paused. "Threatening my granddaughter." James's head snapped up. "They threatened Emma. Brett told David that Kane would hurt her if David didn't follow through. Mentioned a 9-year-old girl named Sofia Rodriguez whose mother's house was burned with her inside." Chen was writing furiously now. "Did he say when this happened?" "Last year." She underlined something. "We'll look into that. If we can connect Kane to another arson murder, it strengthens the conspiracy charge." "So what happens now?" I asked. James and Chen exchanged a look. "Now we watch the footage," James said. "All of it. If it shows what you say it shows, we'll get arrest warrants for David Sullivan, Brett Carlson, and Marcus Kane. Conspiracy to commit murder, arson, insurance fraud. Maybe more." "How long will that take?" "For the warrants, a few hours. Judge Patterson owes me a favor. And David is currently in interview room 2 requesting a lawyer." James leaned back in his chair. "He thinks you're dead, Mrs. Sullivan. He's been crying for the last hour, saying he should have checked on you one more time." I felt something twist in my chest. Not quite sympathy, not quite pain, something in between. "Do you want to see him?" James asked quietly. "No." "Are you sure?" "Sometimes I'm sure." I set down my coffee cup. Detective Reynolds, my son, tried to murder me for insurance money. He locked me in my home and set it on fire. The fact that he's crying now doesn't change that. Chen spoke up. For what it's worth, Mrs. Sullivan, you did the right thing. You gathered evidence. You protected yourself. And now we can protect other people from Marcus Kane. Other people. I hadn't thought about that. About the Sofia Rodriguez that Brett mentioned. About how many other accidents Kane had orchestrated. This is bigger than your son, Chen continued. Kane runs a debt collection scheme. He loans money to desperate people at impossible interest rates. When they can't pay, he forces them to commit insurance fraud, sets fires, stages accidents. We've suspected it for years, but we've never had proof. Until now, James added. I looked at the USB drive in its evidence bag. 5 months of my life. 5 months of watching my son transform from a troubled addict into a potential murderer. Will he go to prison? I asked. If the evidence supports it, yes. James's voice was gentle. Conspiracy to commit murder carries 25 to life in California, with the video evidence and the physical evidence from the scene. He trailed off. 25 to life. David would be 67 years old before he even became eligible for parole. Mrs. Sullivan, Chen said, I need to ask, are you prepared to testify against your son? Was I thought about the David I'd raised, the sensitive boy who'd cried when his hamster died, who'd wanted to be an artist before Thomas crushed that dream, who'd called me every Sunday after his first divorce just to hear my voice. Then I thought about the David who'd forged my will, who'd locked my doors from the outside, who'd stood in my kitchen discussing my death like it was a business transaction. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. James nodded, stood up. Okay, let's get your full statement on record, and then we're taking you somewhere safe, just in case. In case of what? In case Kane finds out you're alive before we can arrest him. I hadn't thought about that either. How long will I need to be in protective custody? A few days, maybe a week, just until we can secure all 3 suspects. Chen stood too. Mrs. Sullivan, you understand that once we arrest David, this becomes public record. Your neighbors, your friends, everyone will know what happened. I thought about Barbara's face when she saw me alive, about the Chens and the Rodriguezes and Mr. Patterson, about what they'd think when they learned the truth. Let them know, I said. I'm done keeping secrets. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in downtown Riverside, 15 minutes from the police station. 2 bedrooms, basic furniture windows that overlooked a parking lot. Detective Reynolds dropped me off at 3:47 p.m., a full 9 hours after I'd stepped out of the shadows. There's food in the fridge, toiletries in the bathroom. Officer Martinez will be stationed outside your door 24/7. He handed me a burner phone. My number's programmed in. You need anything, you call. I took the phone, looked around the sterile apartment. How long? We're executing warrants tonight. If everything goes smoothly, 3 days max. And if it doesn't go smoothly? James didn't answer. He didn't need to. After he left, I sat on the cheap IKEA couch and finally let myself feel it. The exhaustion, the smoke still coating my lungs, the reality that I'd lost everything I owned except the clothes on my back and a USB drive full of evidence. 43 years, gone in 4 hours. I didn't cry. I was too tired to cry. Instead, I took a shower, the first real shower in nearly 12 hours. The water ran gray with soot and ash. I scrubbed my skin until it hurt trying to wash away the smell of smoke. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that smelled like detergent, and nothing else, the burner phone was ringing. James's number. We got them, he said without preamble. David, Brett, and Kane, all 3 in custody. No bail. I sat down on the bed. That fast? Kane made it easy. He was at Brett's house when we arrived, probably checking on whether the job was done. James paused. He had a gun on him. Unregistered. That's a parole violation on top of everything else. What about David? Lawyered up immediately. Stephen Clean from Clean & Associates. Expensive defense attorney. Another pause. Someone's paying for it. We're betting it's Kane trying to keep David from flipping. Will he flip? Depends. Right now, he's still claiming he was at Brett's house all night playing poker. Says he had nothing to do with the fire. I thought about David's face when he saw the ruins, the tears, the collapse. He's lying. We know. We have your recordings, but... James sighed. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to prepare you. David's lawyer is going to argue that you're an unreliable witness, that you're elderly, possibly confused, possibly vindictive after family disputes. I'm 68, not senile. I know that, but juries can be swayed, especially when a defense attorney is playing the devoted son card. Devoted? The word tasted like ash. He tried to burn me alive, and we'll prove that. But it's going to be hard, on both of you. After we hung up, I lay in the dark and thought about David, about the boy who'd cried over a dead hamster, about the man who'd poured gasoline on my kitchen floor. Where had one ended and the other begun? The next morning, Detective Reynolds arrived with Patricia Reeves, my lawyer. Patricia was 72, sharp as a tack, and had handled Thomas's estate with ruthless efficiency. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. Jesus Christ, Maggie. When I got the email you sent me 5 months ago, I thought you were being paranoid. She pulled back, holding my shoulders. You weren't being paranoid. No, I said. I wasn't. We sat at the kitchen table. Patricia pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. Okay, let's talk about what happens next. The DA is charging David with conspiracy to commit murder-arson in the first-degree insurance fraud and attempted murder. Brett Carlson is facing the same charges. Marcus Kane is looking at racketeering conspiracy and about 15 other counts. What does that mean? In terms of sentencing, for David, if convicted on all counts, he's looking at 25 to life, possibly longer with the insurance fraud enhancements. 25 to life. I'd known it was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. There's something else, Patricia said carefully. David's lawyer approached the DA this morning. He wants to make a deal. James leaned forward. David's willing to testify against Kane in exchange for a reduced sentence. 15 years with possibility of parole after 10. 15 years. I did the math. David was 42. He'd be 52 when he got out. Still young enough to rebuild a life. It's a good deal, Mrs. Sullivan, Patricia said. Kane is the bigger fish. He's orchestrated at least 4 other arson schemes that we know of. One resulted in a death, that 9-year-old girl, Sofia Rodriguez. If David's testimony puts Kane away for life, that's a win. And if I say no, Patricia and James exchanged a look. Then we go to trial, James said. All 3 of them. David fights the charges. His lawyer argues reasonable doubt. Maybe he wins, maybe he doesn't. But either way, it's months of court dates, testimony, media coverage. And trauma, Patricia added gently. Maggie, I know he's your son, but testifying in open court about this, it's going to be brutal. I thought about David in the interrogation room crying, about whether those tears were real or performed. I need to see him, I said. What? James frowned. Mrs. Sullivan, I don't think... I need to see him, talk to him, before I decide anything. Patricia shook her head. Maggie, that's not a good idea. Anything you say to him can be used in court. His lawyer will be present. It's not going to be a private conversation. I don't care. I need to look him in the eye. James sighed. If you're sure about this, I can arrange it. But his lawyer will advise him not to talk to you. Then he won't talk. But I will. The meeting was scheduled for October 3rd, 5 days after the fire. James drove me to the county jail, a squat concrete building that looked exactly like what it was. You've got 30 minutes, he said. His lawyer will be there, probably coaching him to stay silent. Don't expect a confession. I'm not expecting anything. They led me to a small conference room. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a table bolted to the floor. David sat on one side in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. Stephen Kleen, his lawyer, sat beside him in a $3,000 suit. David looked up when I entered. His face was gaunt, unshaven. He'd lost weight in 5 days. Mom, his voice cracked. You're alive. Surprised, Jan, I sat down across from him. He glanced at his lawyer. Kleen shook his head slightly. I'm glad you're okay. Are you? Silence. Stephen Kleen cleared his throat. Mrs. Sullivan, I've advised my client not to discuss the charges against him. If you're here to... I'm here to talk to my son. I didn't take my eyes off David. That's all. Kleen looked uncomfortable but nodded. Go ahead. But David, remember what we discussed. I pulled 3 envelopes from my purse. Letters I'd written in the safe house, unable to sleep. I pushed them across the table. What are these? David asked. Letters. From you? To me. I tapped the first envelope. This one is from August 15th. You wrote, Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I owe money to people who don't forgive debt. I'm scared. David's face went white. I tapped the second envelope. This one is from September 1st. Mom, I think I'm going to do something terrible. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to ask for help. Dad always said asking for help makes you weak. Mom, I never… And this one, I interrupted, tapping the third envelope, is from September 27th, the night before the fire. Mom, if something happens to me, I want you to know I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I became what Dad feared I'd be. David stared at the envelopes. I didn't write those. I know. I leaned forward. But you should have. Tears spilled down his face. I couldn't. Why not? Because you would have tried to help. You would have given me money. And then Cain would have known you had money. He would have come after you anyway. His voice broke. There was no way out. Stephen Clean put a hand on David's arm. David stopped talking, but David ignored him. I tried, Mom. I swear to God I tried to think of another way. But Cain said if I didn't pay, he'd go after Emma. My daughter. Your granddaughter. He'd burn down Jennifer's house with Emma inside, just like he did to Sofia Rodriguez. My chest tightened. So you chose me instead. I thought… He wiped his face with cuffed hands. I thought you'd go fast. Smoke inhalation. You wouldn't feel it. Emma's 9 years old. She has her whole life. You're old. I finished. I was going to say you'd already lived. The room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. David, I said quietly, did it ever occur to you that I would rather die than have my granddaughter die, that I would have paid your debt if it meant protecting Emma? You don't have that kind of money. I have equity in my house. I have Thomas's life insurance that I never touched. I have investments you don't know about because your father never thought women should handle finances. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, turned it to show him. I have $240,000 in savings. I could have paid Cain. We could have figured it out together. David stared at the screen. You have $240,000. I've been saving for 30 years, living below my means, planning for emergencies. I locked the phone. But you never asked. You just assumed I was a broke old lady waiting to die. Jesus Christ, David whispered. Jesus fucking Christ. Stephen Clean was writing furiously on his legal pad, probably realizing his case just got more complicated. Mrs. Sullivan, Clean said carefully, are you saying you would have paid your son's debt if he'd asked? I'm saying I would have done anything to protect my family, including my son, even after what he did. David put his head in his hands and sobbed. I let him cry. I'd cried enough in the last 5 days. Now it was his turn. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and swollen. What happens now? That depends on you, I said. The DA wants you to testify against Cain. 15 years instead of life. 15 years. He laughed bitterly. Emma will be 24 when I get out. She won't even remember me. Then you'd better write her letters. Real ones. Not the ones I made up. David looked at me for a long moment. You're really going to testify against me? If it goes to trial, yes. Even knowing about Emma, about Cain's threat, especially knowing that, because if we don't stop Cain, he'll do this to another family, another David, another Emma. Silence. I'll take the deal, David said quietly. Clean looked up sharply. David, we should discuss. I'll take the deal. I'll testify against Cain. I'll tell them everything. David met my eyes. But I need you to do something for me. What, Emma? Jennifer won't let me contact her, won't let me write or call. But you could reach out. You could tell her. He swallowed hard. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her. Tell her not to be like me. I thought about Emma. 6 years old the last time I saw her, all gap-toothed smile and wild curls. She'd be 12 now, almost a teenager. I'll try, I said, but I won't lie to her. If she asks what you did, I'll tell her the truth. I know. David looked down at his cuffed hands. Maybe that's better anyway. At least she'll know to avoid my mistakes. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood. Mom, David said, for what it's worth, I really am glad you're alive. When I saw the house burning when I thought you were inside, I wanted to die too. I still do most days. Don't, said. You have 15 years to figure out how to live with what you did. Don't waste them. I walked out without looking back. 3 days later, Detective Reynolds called me with news. We found her, he said. Sofia Rodriguez. She didn't die in the fire. I sat up straight on the safe house couch. What? Yeah, the fire at her mother's house in 2019. Official report said she died of smoke inhalation. Body recovered, case closed. James paused. But we ran DNA on the remains. It wasn't Sofia. It was her mother's niece visiting from Mexico. 16 years old. Then where's Sofia? That's what we're trying to find out. But here's the thing, her father Miguel Rodriguez disappeared 3 days after the fire. Left town, no forwarding address. We think Kane helped him fake Sofia's death and flee. Why would Kane do that? Because Miguel owed him $180,000. Kane probably told him the same thing he told David: pay up or your kid dies. Miguel couldn't pay. So Kane offered an alternative: fake the kid's death, collect insurance, give Kane his cut. Miguel and Sofia get to disappear with whatever's left. The pieces were falling into place. How many others? We're looking at 6 cases over the last 3 years, all house fires, all with someone who owed Kane money. 3 resulted in deaths or supposed deaths. The other 3, the families survived but collected insurance payouts. Kane was running an arson for debt scheme. Exactly, and David's testimony is going to crack it wide open. He can connect Kane to Brett Carlson. Brett can connect Kane to the other families. It's going to be a RICO case, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. Kane's looking at life without parole. Good, I said. There's more. We found Kane's records. Ledgers going back 5 years. Your son wasn't his only target in your family. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Thomas, your late husband. He owed Kane $65,000 when he died. Thomas, the poker games, the mysterious absences. Kane was the one Thomas borrowed from. Looks like it. Kane's ledger shows Thomas made regular payments until March 2022. Then the payments stopped. March 2022, the month Thomas had his heart attack. You think Kane killed him, I said slowly. I think Kane might have pressured him, threatened him, and Thomas's heart couldn't take the stress. James sighed. We'll never prove it. But yeah, I think Kane contributed to your husband's death. I closed my eyes. Thomas hadn't been perfect, but he hadn't deserved to die at 65, terrified and alone. And David, I asked. Did David know Thomas owed Kane money? We think so. Kane's ledger shows David started making payments on Thomas's debt 6 months after Thomas died. That's probably when his own gambling problem started, trying to pay off his father's debt with money he didn't have. The intergenerational trauma. Thomas's addiction becoming David's burden. David's burden becoming his crime. I want to testify, I said. Not just about David. About all of it. Kane needs to pay for what he did to my family. You'll get your chance, James said. Trial's set for November 15th, 6 weeks from now. The insurance company paid out faster than I expected. $680,000 for the house. Another $150,000 for contents. After Patricia took her fees and I paid off the mortgage balance, I had roughly $700,000. More money than I'd ever had in my life. I used $35,000 to rent a furnished apartment on the other side of Riverside. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a balcony overlooking a small park. The lease was month to month. I didn't know where I'd end up. The rest of the money sat in a high-yield savings account earning interest while I figured out what came next. Pat Morrison visited on October 20th, bringing a casserole and a sympathy card signed by all the neighbors. We miss you on Riverside Drive, she said, setting the casserole in my fridge. The street isn't the same without you. I can't go back there, Pat. Not with the house gone. The lot's still there. You could rebuild. Could I return to that street, that neighborhood, that life, watch a new house rise from the ashes of the old one? Maybe, I said. Someday. Pat sat down at my kitchen table, her face serious. Maggie, I need to ask, are you okay? Really okay. I'd lost my home. My son was going to prison. My husband's memory was tainted by debt and lies. I was living in a rented apartment with nothing but the insurance payout and a future that looked nothing like I'd planned. I'm alive, I said. That's more than I expected to be a month ago. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Pat reached across the table, squeezed my hand. Whatever you need. I'm here. After she left, I sat on my balcony and watched the sun set over Riverside. The city looked different from this vantage point. Smaller, more manageable. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I called Jennifer. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Jennifer, it's Margaret. David's mother. A long pause. I heard what happened. The fire, the arrests. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. I survived. I took a breath. I'm calling about Emma. David asked me to reach out to her, to tell her the truth. She already knows. She saw the news. She asked me if her father tried to kill you. Jennifer's voice was tight. I didn't know what to tell her. Tell her the truth. He did. He made a terrible choice because he was scared and desperate and couldn't see another way out. And that's supposed to make her feel better. No, but it's honest. And kids deserve honesty even when it's ugly. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. She wants to see you. Emma. She asked if she could visit. My heart squeezed. When next month we're coming to California for Thanksgiving, we could drive down to Riverside. I'd like that. After we hung up, I sat on the balcony until the stars came out. Emma wanted to see me. My granddaughter, who I hadn't seen in 6 years, who'd grown from a little girl into a preteen while I wasn't looking. David had taken so much from me, but he hadn't taken everything. November 15th arrived with unexpected rain. I wore Thomas's suit jacket, the gray one he'd bought for our 30th anniversary. It still smelled faintly of his cologne even after 3 years. Patricia said I should wear something more feminine, more sympathetic. But I didn't want sympathy. I wanted strength. The courthouse was packed. Media trucks lined the street. Reporters shouted questions as Patricia and Detective Reynolds escorted me through the side entrance. Mrs. Sullivan, how do you feel about testifying against your son? Mrs. Sullivan, do you think David deserves life in prison? Mrs. Sullivan, will you ever forgive him? I kept my head down and said nothing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a judge's bench that looked like it came from a 1970s government surplus sale. Marcus Kane sat at the defense table with 2 lawyers. He was 54, balding, with the kind of face that looked pleasant until you saw his eyes. Cold. Calculating. He looked at me once, smiled. I looked away. David sat in the gallery wearing a suit his lawyer had bought him. We'd agreed he wouldn't be in the courtroom for my testimony, too distracting for the jury, but he'd insisted on being there for the opening statements. Our eyes met briefly. He mouthed something. Maybe, I'm sorry. Maybe, I love you. I looked away. The prosecutor, Deputy DA Karen Chen, stood to give her opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the next 2 weeks, you're going to hear about a man who preyed on desperate people, who offered them loans they couldn't repay, then forced them into impossible choices. Burn down your house, fake your death, destroy your family, or watch him destroy it for you. She gestured to Kane. Marcus Kane is a predator, and Margaret Sullivan, a 68-year-old retired schoolteacher, nearly became his victim. But she survived, and now she's here to make sure he never hurts another family again. Kane's lawyer stood for his opening. He was older, silver-haired, with the kind of voice that made everything sound reasonable. My client is a businessman, not a particularly nice one, I'll grant you, but lending money even at high interest rates is not a crime. What David Sullivan chose to do with his debt, that was his choice, not Marcus Kane's. Mrs. Sullivan wants revenge for her son's actions. That's understandable, but my client is not responsible for another man's choices. It was a good argument, almost convincing. But then Karen called me to the stand. I walked slowly, my hip aching from sitting too long. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked at the jury. 12 faces, 6 women, 6 men, ages ranging from early 20s to late 60s. They looked at me with curiosity, sympathy, doubt. Karen started gently. Mrs. Sullivan, can you tell the jury about your relationship with your son? I took a breath. David is my only child. I raised him alone after his father died. He struggled with addiction gambling like his father. I knew he had problems, but I never imagined he'd take your time. I never imagined he'd try to kill me. The courtroom was silent. Karen led me through the story. The fake mold inspection, the camera, the recordings, the night of the fire. And where were you, Karen asked, when David and Brett Carlson set your house on fire? In the garage. I'd been sleeping there for 4 months. They didn't know I'd stayed awake. They thought I'd taken the sleeping pills David had been giving me. Why didn't you take them? Because I knew what they were. I flushed them down the toilet. Kane's lawyer objected. Speculation. The witness has no way of knowing what those pills were. Sustained, the judge said. Mrs. Sullivan, please stick to facts. I nodded. Karen continued. What did you do when you realized they were going to set the fire? I waited. I recorded everything. And when they lit the match, I stayed in the garage and let them think I'd died. Why? Because I needed to see David's reaction. I needed to know if he felt any remorse. And did he? I thought about David collapsing in the street. His screams. His tears. Yes, I said quietly. I think he did. Kane's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Sullivan, you recorded these alleged conversations without your son's knowledge. Isn't that a violation of his privacy? California is a one-party consent state. I can record conversations in my own home. But you were spying on him, your own son. Doesn't that suggest a lack of trust, a pre-existing conflict? It suggests I was protecting myself, or seeking revenge for family disputes. He picked up a document. Isn't it true that you and David argued frequently about money, that he asked you for help and you refused? My hands tightened on the armrests. He never asked me for help. If he had, I would have given him everything. But you didn't know he needed help. He hid it from me. Or did you ignore the signs because you were angry about his gambling, just like you were angry about your late husband's gambling? Karen objected. Relevance, Your Honor. Sustained. Move on, counselor. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. They were wondering if I was a bitter old woman taking revenge on a son who reminded me of my dead husband. Kane's lawyer continued. Mrs. Sullivan, you claim my client threatened your son, but you have no direct evidence of that, do you? No recordings of Marcus Kane making threats. I have David's testimony, David Sullivan, who is facing life in prison. Who would say anything to reduce his sentence? That's not evidence. That's self-preservation. I have Brett Carlson's testimony. Brett Carlson, who is also facing life in prison, also cooperating for a reduced sentence. Do you see a pattern here, Mrs. Sullivan? I met his eyes. Yes, I see a pattern of Marcus Kane manipulating desperate people into committing crimes, then hiding behind lawyers when he gets caught. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Mrs. Sullivan, please just answer the questions. But I'd made my point. The trial lasted 12 days. David testified on day 3. He walked the jury through his gambling addiction, his debt to Kane, the threats against Emma, the impossible choice Kane had forced him to make. I thought I was protecting my daughter, David said, his voice breaking. I thought if I paid Kane with the insurance money, Emma would be safe. My mother would be gone, but Emma would live. Kane's lawyer shredded him on cross-examination. You chose to gamble. You chose to borrow money. You chose to burn down your mother's house. Those were your choices, Mr. Sullivan, not my client's. Brett Carlson testified on day 5. He admitted to 4 other arsons, showed receipts for gasoline road flares accelerants, named names other desperate people Kane had coerced into insurance fraud. The Sofia Rodriguez case broke open on day 8. Prosecutors introduced evidence that Miguel Rodriguez had paid Kane $200,000 in insurance proceeds after faking his daughter's death. Phone records showed Kane calling Miguel 27 times in the week before the fire. Miguel himself appeared via video from an undisclosed location in Mexico. He'd been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Kane said if I didn't pay, he'd kill Sofia. Miguel testified, tears streaming down his face. He said he'd make it look like an accident. So I staged her death. Killed my niece instead. God forgive me, I killed my own niece to save my daughter. The courtroom was silent. On day 12, the prosecution rested. Kane's lawyer called character witnesses business associates who swore Kane was a legitimate lender, nothing more. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they filed back in, their faces were grim. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. On the charge of a conspiracy to commit arson, guilty. 7 more charges, 7 more guilty verdicts. Marcus Kane's face never changed, but his lawyers deflated like punctured tires. The judge set sentencing for December 15th. Mr. Kane, you are remanded to custody. Bail is denied. As they led Kane out in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. That same cold smile. I stared back. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just watched him disappear through the door. David's sentencing was separate, scheduled for December 1st. Patricia drove me to the courthouse. I'd thought long and hard about whether to attend. David had asked me not to, said he couldn't bear to see my face when the judge handed down his sentence. But I went anyway. The courtroom was nearly empty this time. No media, no curious onlookers. Just me, Patricia Stephen Kleen, and a court reporter. David was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He'd lost more weight. His hair had gone gray at the temples, stress probably. He was 42 but looked 50. When he saw me, his face crumpled. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Ortiz, reviewed the case file. Mr. Sullivan, you've pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and arson in the first degree. In exchange for your testimony against Marcus Kane, the people have agreed to a sentence of 15 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 10 years. She looked up at David. Before I accept this plea agreement, I want to hear from you. Why did you do this? And what do you want to say to your mother? David stood slowly. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, I don't have a good answer. I was desperate. I was scared. I was trying to protect my daughter from a monster, and I became a monster myself. His voice cracked. My mother didn't deserve what I did to her. She spent her whole life taking care of me, protecting me, believing in me. And I repaid her by trying to burn her alive. He turned to me. Mom, I know I'm sorry doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't undo what I did. But I am sorry. I'm sorry for betraying your trust. I'm sorry for destroying your home. I'm sorry for every lie I told and every choice I made that led to this moment. Tears streamed down his face. You saved my life by testifying against Kane. You saved Emma's life. You saved God knows how many other families from going through what we went through. You're the strongest person I know. And I'm the weakest. He took a shuddering breath. I hope someday you can forgive me. But if you can't, I understand. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself. The courtroom was silent except for his quiet sobbing. Judge Ortiz looked at me. Mrs. Sullivan, would you like to make a statement? I stood, walked to the front of the courtroom, stood 10 feet from my son. David, I said quietly, you made terrible choices. You hurt me in ways I'll never fully recover from. You destroyed my home, my sense of safety, my trust. I paused. But you're still my son. His head snapped up. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something I might choose to give if I ever feel ready. I took a breath. But I do believe you can become someone better than who you were. Your father never believed that about himself. He died thinking he'd always be an addict, always be a failure. I met David's eyes. Don't die thinking that. You have 10 years minimum before you're eligible for parole. Use them. Get therapy. Work on yourself. Figure out who you want to be when you get out. And Emma, he whispered, I'll tell her about you. The truth, good and bad. And when she's ready, if she wants to write to you, I'll help her. But that's her choice, not mine. David nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. I turned to Judge Ortiz. Your Honor, I support the plea agreement. Marcus Kane is the real monster here. My son was his victim before he became mine. 15 years gives him a chance at redemption. That's more than Kane ever gave anyone. Judge Ortiz nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. She turned to David. Mr. Sullivan, I accept your guilty plea. I sentence you to 15 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 10 years contingent on completion of substance abuse treatment and demonstrated rehabilitation. The gavel came down. David was led away. At the door, he turned back once, mouthed, I love you. I didn't say it back, but I nodded. 6 months later, I stood in front of the empty lot on Riverside Drive where my house used to be. The insurance company had cleared the debris months ago. Now it was just bare earth and the oak tree. The tree had survived. New leaves pushed through the charred bark, bright green against the black. Stubborn, Resilient. Like me, I'd decided not to rebuild. Not here, not on ground soaked with betrayal and gasoline. Instead, I donated the lot to the city. They were going to turn it into a small community garden, a place for neighbors to grow vegetables and flowers, to create something living from what had died. Pat Morrison had helped me design it. We'd planted lavender around the oak tree's base last week. For healing, the gardening book said. For hope. Emma visited once a month now. She was 12, all gangly limbs and questions. She asked about David, about what he'd done, about why people made terrible choices. I told her the truth, not to make excuses, but to help her understand. Your dad got lost. I told her last visit. He made a choice to protect you, but it was the wrong choice. Wrong choices have consequences. Will I visit him? She'd asked. When he's in prison? That's up to you, when you're ready. She'd thought about it. Maybe when I'm older, when I understand things better. That's wise. I'd moved into a small house in the suburbs, 1 bedroom, a tiny yard, enough space for me and occasional visits from Emma. I'd spent $180,000 on it, paid in cash. The rest of the insurance money sat in investments earning interest. Some of it would go to Emma's college fund, some to charities Thomas had loved, and some, a small monthly amount, went into David's prison commissary account. I didn't tell him I was doing it. I didn't want his thanks. But I wasn't going to let him starve or go without basic necessities. Punishment was the state's job, not mine. Marcus Kane had been sentenced to life without parole. 3 consecutive life terms, to be exact. He'd never see daylight as a free man again. Brett Carlson got 25 years. He'd be 70 when he got out, too old to burn anything but memories. Detective Reynolds stopped by sometimes, brought coffee, asked how I was doing. We'd developed a friendship, 2 people who'd survived things they shouldn't have. You ever regret it? He asked once. Recording David instead of just calling the police. I thought about it. No. If I'd called without evidence, it would have been my word against his. An old woman paranoid about her son. They might not have believed me. And now Kane's in prison. His victims are getting justice. That's worth the nightmares. You still having them. The nightmares. Every night. But they're getting quieter. He'd nodded. Understood. Some traumas don't heal, they just learn to coexist with you. Today, standing in front of the empty lot, I pulled out the letter I'd written 6 months ago. The one I'd buried under the oak tree before the fire. The city workers had found it during debris removal. Returned it to me in a Ziploc bag, dirt-stained but intact. I opened it now. Read my own words from a lifetime ago. Dear Maggie, if you're reading this, something terrible happened. Or something terrible almost happened and you stopped it. Either way, remember, you are not what they tried to burn. You are what remained. You are stronger than Thomas ever gave you credit for. Smarter than David realized. Tougher than the neighbors assumed. You are a woman who survived. And survival, real survival, isn't about not getting hurt. It's about getting hurt and choosing to keep going anyway. Plant something. Grow something. Build something. And remember, even ashes can grow roots. Love, Maggie. I folded the letter carefully, put it in my pocket. Then I knelt in the dirt and planted one more thing, a sapling. A young oak tree barely 3 feet tall, bought from the nursery that morning. In 50 years, it would be as tall as the old oak. Would provide shade for people I'd never meet. Would stand as proof that endings can become beginnings. I patted the soil around its roots. Stood slowly, my hip aching. Pat Morrison appeared beside me. You ready? Yeah. We walked back to her car. Behind us, 2 oak trees stood in the spring sunshine. One charred but healing. One young but growing. Both stubborn. Both surviving. Both sending roots deep into the ground, claiming their space in the world. As we drove away, I looked back once. The empty lot didn't look empty anymore. It looked like possibility.